Think of it this way. Long before Wall Street was founded, long before Rome even dreamed of becoming an empire, there was a power that understood something crucial. It understood that you cannot rule a vast empire by brute force alone. True control is achieved through the silent, invisible architecture of money. And the Achaemenid Persians didn't just understand this, they built it from scratch. They turned finance into a weapon far more durable than any sword. Most of us, when we hear Persians, imagine great armies and grand palaces, but the real power lay beneath that spectacle. A financial system so advanced that it resembles what we still use today. Taxes, a standardized currency, administrative districts, state reserves. These sound normal to us, right? But they were not invented by the Greeks or the Romans. The world's first fully integrated imperial financial system was created by the Persians. Why did such a system emerge? Because every great empire, once it expands rapidly, faces the same colossal problem: chaos. Cyrus the Great ruled nearly half of the world's population. Across this immense geography, every region had its own taxes and its own measures, one paid in grain, another in cattle, another in silver. This system worked locally but was a disaster on an imperial scale. Just like a company growing faster than its accounting, the Persians were on the verge of collapse. Governors were corrupt, and money vanished long before it reached the capital. To keep the empire standing required not just soldiers, it required structure, order, and a central brain. That is where Darius I stepped in. His job wasn't to reinvent the empire, but to stabilize it. His answer was simple but radical: to bring a systematic, unified approach to money and power. In other words, imperial finance. Darius divided the empire into administrative regions called satrapies. Each region was assigned a fixed and precise tax quota based on its wealth. No more arbitrary tribute. Everything was known, predictable, and recorded. Imagine living in the 5th century BCE and learning that your tax burden was no longer arbitrary. You would have become part of the world's first large-scale bureaucratic tax system. Darius understood something essential. Economies grow not with confusion, but with confidence. That's why he introduced a new currency known as the gold daric. The daric, 95.8% pure with a standard weight, was a promise. It allowed a merchant in Egypt to trade with a merchant in India using the same currency. The daric was so reliable that even the Greeks, their enemies, used it. It was the world's first reserve currency, much like our modern dollar. If even your enemies trust your money, you know you're doing something right. Darius built a 2,700-kilometer road. Couriers traveled from Susa to Sardis in just 7 to 9 days. Infrastructure is power. Like today's fiber optic cables, whoever moves information and goods controls power. The treasures of Persepolis weren't just vaults of jewels. They were strategic reserves. If war broke out, if rebellion rose, if famine struck, they didn't panic. They opened the treasury. Wealth wasn't for show, it was for survival. The Persians didn't leave behind a philosophy or an economic thesis. Their wisdom survived through practice. And that practice tells the same hard truth every modern nation eventually learns. Power is not built on conquest, but on financial clarity. Empires do not fall when they lose wars. They fall when they lose their ability to measure and secure their resources. Wars are only symptoms. The diagnosis is financial collapse. Rome didn't fall because of its soldiers, but because of centuries of devalued money and debt. Spain drowned under its own silver because it couldn't maintain Persian discipline. Armies are never the first to give in. The balance sheet is. Meanwhile, countries like China are adopting the old Persian playbook: central planning, strategic reserves, and long-term financial strategy. The Persians showed us this. Unless your financial architecture is honest and disciplined, you cannot finance your power. Even the best system collapses when leaders stop respecting their own rules. When Alexander came, it wasn't heroism that defeated the Persians. It was an empire that had forgotten its own system. Keep your structures strong. Treat monetary clarity as a form of power. Because history does not repeat. But if you fail to understand it, it will still crush you.